Welcome to the 2025 Ultralight Rod Buying Guide. We did get some interesting updates in the last 12 months and I think it's worth updating the buying guide. Let's start with the $20 price point, where for years my recommendation has been the Shakespeare Micro. I don't know why the name of this model says series. That doesn't make sense to me. What makes it a series? If this is a series, then every other rod in Bass Pro Shops is also a series. Nevertheless, every time the YouTube experts do a review of this rod, they never fail to let you know that this is a series, and I get a chuckle from this every single time. But okay, putting the name of the rod aside, the one thing that people have complained for years is that the models that I recommend are not available anywhere. There is some good news and bad news about this. The good news is that Shakespeare finally received a new batch of these rods, and as of recording of this video, all models are now available. The bad news is that Shakespeare decided that the right thing to do with this best-selling rod is to remove one of the guides. The old rod, which had a gray blank, had 7 guides, and the new one, which has a black blank now, has only 6 guides. This decision just fills me up with negative energy. I don't even know if this is a cost-cutting measure because these guides cost nothing. Maybe the rod was eating the sales of more expensive models and they decided to knock it down on purpose. I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me. Now, if we put the emotions aside, and in this case it's not easy, even with 6 guides, this rod is by far your best budget option available. You are just not gonna beat this rod under $30. The only thing is, before it was hard to beat under $60. Anyway, just like before, the only models that I recommend from this rod are the 6'6" light power and 7'0" light power. The other models are either too short or too wobbly. Of course, if you see the old models somewhere with the gray blank, my advice is just buy them right away and later you will worry what you're gonna use them for. These rods, folks, both the old ones and the new ones, have an absolutely universal bending curve that is just good for everything. As a matter of fact, in this entire buying guide, there are very few rods that are good for everything, and this is interestingly one of them. But these rods, the 2 models that I recommended, are good for twitching, they're good for swim baits, they're good for float fishing, they're good for drop shot, they're good for everything. Yeah, it sucks to lose the 7th guide, but for $20, you're still getting a blank that's good for everything, and it has decent length. The next price point where I have a strong recommendation is $39.99. If you are looking for a twitch rod under $100, this is my strongest recommendation by far. The rod is Bass Pro Shops Crappie Max Pro. I know it doesn't sound fancy and it doesn't look fancy, but it is very light, the tip is very sharp, the balance is great, and the bend curve is just perfect for twitching. The best model in the lineup is definitely the 6'0" medium light. Don't worry about the label, the actual power of this rod is ultralight. The other model that's really good is the 6'6" light power. This one is a little bit longer and a little bit heavier, and as a result it's not as crisp and nimble as the 6'0". But if you fish from the bank, the longer blank can be more useful in some situations. Honestly, both of these rods are so good and so cheap that I would buy them both and use them in slightly different applications, because you'll see that they're not exactly the same rod and one can be better in one case and the other one in a different case. If you want a sharp tip and good bending curve under $100, this is it. Yeah, you can twitch with the Shakespeare Micro, but this blank is better for that and it has a full set of guides. At $50, my favorite rod is again the Shimano SensiLight A. This rod looks absolutely gorgeous, folks. Just go watch the first 30 seconds of my full review and you will see what I mean. It looks like a $180 St. Croix rod. The blank has a very parabolic bend and is amazing for casting things like swim baits, spoons, spinners, where people fish with constant retrieve. You can twitch with it too if you want, because the blank doesn't wobble, and I did make a couple of videos twitching with this rod, but it felt a little bit dead and numb and I just didn't like it and I never tried it again. But if you're one of these people that fish with braid, I think you will have just enough sensitivity and you can twitch with the rod too. If you do plan to do occasional twitching with the rod, go for the shorter 6'0" model, otherwise go for the 6'6" because that one is the best for everything. And if you want a model for long distance swimbait casting from the bank and occasional float fishing, the 7'0" is the model for that. My next recommendation is the Daiwa Presso, which costs $70 at full price today. If you are looking for a float fishing rod, folks, you can just end this video here, just go buy this rod and be confident that you made a choice that cannot be beat today. When you cast with this rod, the whole blank loads up. When you catch a fish, the whole blank loads up. It has guides that are big enough so you don't have to worry if you have to run some knots through the guides. And the aesthetics are absolutely unparalleled in the budget segment. I think it actually looks better than the $200 Presso, because the $200 Presso has just a little bit too much bling and this one just looks more natural to me. There are three good models for float fishing: 7'0", 7'6", and the 8'0", and they all have the same action and behavior, but in general don't buy longer than what you need. The 6'6" model is a very good swimbait rod, but that segment is very competitive and this rod is just one of many good options that you have there. This rod also had a refresh last year, and you can tell the old models from the new models by the inserts in the guides. The old models had black frame and black inserts, and now the new models still have black frame, but they have silver inserts now. I actually haven't decided if I like or hate the new guides. As far as aesthetics go, of course I much prefer the black inserts, but maybe the new silver inserts have a better heat treatment. One problem with the old Presso rods and every other rod with steel guides out there is that with time the top guide of the rod develops a small groove from where the line is always running. That little groove will start to take little shavings off your line and you're gonna start experiencing some unexplained breakages, sometimes well below the breaking strength of the line. If that happens, inspect the top guide of your rod. If you have to replace that guide, it costs only $1 and it's very easy to replace. Just light up a candle, put the guide over the candle so you can heat it up and it will just fall off by itself. I do recommend replacing that guide with a ceramic guide though, just the one on the top. The friction and the geometry how the line is running is a little bit different there, so I always replace it with a ceramic one. So maybe the silver inserts are made of different steel than the frame of the guide and actually have some heat treatment that makes them more resistant to wear. Because I noticed that some very expensive St. Croix and Fenwick and TFO rods use these silver inserts, and I was just speculating that maybe the silver inserts have a different heat treatment. But I want to be clear that this last tangent is not about presso rods, but about steel guides in general. And if you're looking for a float fishing rod, the Daiwa Presso is still my strongest recommendation. If you can get away with a 7-foot float fishing rod, and if you're fishing with sliding floats, you really don't need anything longer than that. If a 7-footer will suffice, you should give strong consideration to the Okuma SST Special Edition, which also costs $70. If you are worried about what we just discussed about steel guides developing a groove from the fishing line, you will really appreciate this rod. The most important thing that you have to remember about the Okuma SST Special Edition is that it has the most expensive guides under $200. As a matter of fact, it has nicer guides even than the $200 Presso, about which we're going to talk later. The guides of this rod have a beautiful gunmetal finish, but what's more important is that the inserts are made of zirconium ceramic, which is a very hard kind of ceramic, and you are not gonna cut these guides with any kind of line. I don't care if you fish with the roughest 4-strength braid out there, you are not gonna make a groove in this ceramic. The rod also has a blank that is every bit as parabolic as the Presso, but it does feel a little bit more glassy. That blank, by the way, is amazing for casting 2 to 4 gram swim baits. The handle is not really my thing, but on the bright side, that's a handle that will never get dirty and will never wear out. I still like the look and feel of the Presso just a little bit better, but honestly, if you're fishing with braid and 7 foot long is long enough for you, I think it's better to go with the Okuma SST in these cases, because these guides are just something else. You are not gonna find these guides in a rod under $200. The next point where I have recommendations is $120. It's weird, but I didn't find any rods between $70 and $120 that I can recommend. I said this in the last year's buying guide, but St. Croix and Fenwick need to get rid of the dinosaurs who designed their ultralight rods, and they need to hire some young people that have used some JDM rods, that know what twitching is, and overall just have an idea what a good ultralight rod is supposed to feel like. The one rod that I did like at $120 at iCast was the new TFO with the light green blanks. The TFO rods unfortunately still come with the same cheap steel guides, and I think that a fair price for those rods would be $80, but at least other than the price, I liked everything else about those rods. Those guys found a very nice blank. That blank bends very deep, has very smooth bend curve, no flat spots, no kinks, and at the same time is so sharp that even the 7-footers felt sharp enough for twitching to me. Also, I really like the aesthetics of these rods. They look very elegant and the handle is very comfortable. All in all, like I said, I liked everything about these rods except the price. But, you know, if I have to pick, I would rather pay $30 or $40 extra and get something that I like than get some garbage on a discount that I will hate every time I touch. Now, usually when I recommend models, I recommend the shorter ones for twitching so the tip doesn't wobble, and I recommend the longer ones for float fishing and not for twitching. But as I said, these rods have such blanks that you can actually twitch just fine with the 7-footer if so you wish. These rods, you can do anything with any of the models. They just have an universal action. Folks, if you appreciate my reviews, you will appreciate the ultralight products that I design. My jigs have the sharpest hook, the thinnest wire, and the most thoughtful head design in United States. And if you ever hold one of my floats in your hand, It will make everything else that you've seen in Walmart look like farm equipment in comparison. If you've never seen my products, I do want to ask you to go to my shop and just look around. Even if you don't buy anything, I promise you that you will see products that are very different than what you are used to seeing. Before I move up the price scale, I want to repeat a general warning from my last year's buying guide. If you know that a particular rod model is popular among the bass anglers, and that rod goes down to ultralight power, don't buy the ultralight power of these bass rods because you are still buying a bass rod. These are rods like Kage, Tatula, Poison Adrena, Zodias, anything from brands like Luz, Dobbins, Duckett, you get the picture. These rods are designed by bass anglers and they all feel the same way. They never bend in the middle and they absolutely murder the joy of ultralight fishing. The only thing that bends in these rods is the tip, and this is not how you do ultralight fishing. If you want to learn what an ultralight rod is supposed to feel like, try the Beleze UX from Japan, any model over 6 foot long with a tubular tip. And the tubular tip is important because if you get a solid tip, we're going back to bass fishing and murdering the joy of fishing. Of this entire buying guide, this rod is my strongest buying recommendation. And not because it's the best rod in the buying guide, but because the retail price is, or let's say was, only $135. But the rod still feels like just another one of my $300 JDM rods. It just proves that selecting the right components is more important than buying only the most expensive components, because you can make a rod of the most expensive blanks and guides out there, and if you don't know what you're doing, the rod will still feel like crap. But the Beleze UX has a super elegant and super smooth bend curve, folks. No kinks, no flat spots. Even my $300 JDM rods, they all have a flat spot here or there. The weight is only 55 grams. The sensitivity is amazing. Everything about this rod is amazing, but I don't want to spend too much time about this rod because I have a very detailed review about it and at least 30 fishing videos with this rod for those who are interested. So I'm just gonna make a quick comment about the availability of this rod. Yes, the rod is sold out everywhere right now, and if you do find it, it will cost you around $200. But if you are interested in the rod, my advice is don't give up, but save a few links in your favorites and every now and then just check the links, because these rods that are very popular have a habit of miraculously coming back in stock. And I'll get back to that in a little bit. Okay. The next rod I will recommend, admittedly with much less conviction, is the $200 Presso Air that is sold here in United States. The rod has extremely light and sensitive blank and a much sharper tip than anything I recommended so far, including the Beleze. Not that a sharp tip is the most important feature for measuring the quality of a rod, but this is really an identifying feature for this rod, and this is what separates it from the rest of the rods in this buying guide. The guides of the Presso Air are very thin and light and elegant, but it's a little disappointing that the inserts are made of aluminum oxide ceramic, which is the same material used in the $50 Shimano Sensi-Lite A, and much cheaper rod like the Okuma SST has zirconium inserts, but at the end of the day, because these inserts are so tiny, it really doesn't make any difference in weight or anything else. At the end of the day, I can promise you that the Presso Air feels very different than anything you can touch in United States. And if you own any JDM rods, you know that they have a very specific feel. Just to give you a comparison, because I know you like these comparisons, this $200 Presso Air feels much lighter and sharper than a $300 G Loomis ultralight rod. Sadly, Daiwa decided to go with a solid tip for this rod, but I promise you that this does not feel like a bass rod because the middle of the rod is very flexible. So when you actually play the fish, you still play the fish with the entire rod. Now, I'm gonna get a little defensive here because I'm sure somebody will say that you can buy a nicer rod out of Japan for $200. But I live in United States and most of my subscribers live in United States, and you will see that the recommendations that I have for rods out of Japan are very difficult to find. Everybody wants to buy a Beleza for $135 like last year, but go and look for that rod and come and tell me how it went. Not to mention that when you buy a rod from here, you get warranty. You can return it if you don't like it. You actually get a peace of mind. Buying rods out of Japan is always just a little bit sketchy. The next few recommendations I will make, I will just list the rods without mentioning the price because there is no telling how much you will pay for these rods. The MSRP on all of them is roughly the equivalent of 300 American dollars, but that will depend on exchange rate, shipping cost, vendors overcharging for rods that they know I recommended. So there is really no telling how much you're gonna end up paying for the rod, but it will roughly be between $250 and $350. The first recommendation in this segment will again be the Yamaga Blanks Blue Current TZ Nano. If you are looking for your first high-end JDM rod, I strongly recommend you go with this one, something between 6 foot and 7 foot. All of my other recommendations in this segment are specialist rods that are good for one application but not the other. The Yamaga Blanks, folks, is good for everything that I do, and on top of that, it's not that fragile, at least as far as JDM rods go. You still shouldn't high stick fish and lean it against the aluminum frame on the boat, but if you snap this one, you never had a chance with any of the others. I've had this rod for 5 years now, and I have bought and sold many JDM rods in this time, but I still keep my Yamaga Blanks, folks, because all these years I have never found another rod that can do everything that this rod can do, but do it better. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking right now of getting another model with a little bit more power for drop shotting. Some people don't listen and buy the Presso Air AGS or the Eradicator as a first rod, and then they tell me the rod is too flimsy, it's weird, it's not serious. One guy told me that the rod snapped on his first fishing trip. True story, the way I got my second Eradicator was one subscriber from Wisconsin bought it and told me that it feels like a toothpick. That's the exact word he used, toothpick. It just goes to show you, my all-time favorite rod feels like a toothpick to some people. Another rod that's amazing for first JDM rod is the Shimano Suare XR, with the caveat that the only good model is the 7'6" tubular tip. Everything I already said for the Yamaga Blanks also holds for the Suare XR, and on top of that, the Suare XR looks like a piece of art. This rod is my #1 recommendation for bank fishing because of the extra length. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this rod because I have so many videos fishing with it. Lately I have even been using it for float fishing, and even for float fishing it's amazing. And really, the only issue with this rod is that the tubular tip is only available in the 7'6" length, and if you fish from a boat, that can be a little bit too long and kind of awkward for some techniques. But if that length works for you, just take this rod with confidence. And if you want something a little shorter, go for the Yamaga blanks, and you just can't go wrong either way here. My next recommendation in this segment is the Presso Air AGS, a 42-gram rod where the frame of the guide is not made of steel like in the $300 Gilumis rods, is not made of titanium like in the $300 JDM rods, but is made of carbon. 10 years ago, something like this would only have been possible as some kind of exotic handmade product that would cost $1,000. And now this rod is mass produced, and because Daiwa makes it, it is actually readily available. Yes, you have to buy it from Japan, but it is available. If you want to buy a specialist rod for twitching 1-gram jigs with a trout magnet, the best readily available option on the market, in my opinion, is the 5'10" extra ultralight model of the Presso Air AGS. The blank of the 5'10" extra ultralight is actually very parabolic and is also great for throwing micro swim baits like the 125-12 with a 1-inch Charlie Brewer. Honestly, the 5'10" is one of these rods that are good for everything, and as long as the length of the rod is good for your application, I think you will find that you can do anything with it. If you prefer a more classical American action, the model to get is the 6'1" light. The true power is ultralight. If you appreciate the extra 3 inches of length, but you're not a fan of American action, the other option is the 6'1" medium light. Don't be afraid of the medium light power. The true power is actually ultralight. The action of the medium light power, it's nice, but it's just a little bit too parabolic in my opinion, and as a result, I only enjoy this rod for swim baits. I repeat, only get this rod for swim baits. For me, the perfect action is in the 5'10" extra ultralight model because it's just in the middle. The tip is super sharp and excellent for twitching, but it's still parabolic enough so I can do swim baits too with the same rod. And the last rod recommendation of this buying guide is my all-time favorite ultralight fishing rod. Technically it's super ultralight, but that's the Abu Garcia Eradicator. You know, on paper the Eradicator is definitely not the best ultralight fishing rod out there. The guides are kind of soft and flexible. They don't have the carbon frame like on the Presso Air AGS. The weight is 56 grams, which cannot compare to the 42 grams of the Presso Air AGS. The blank has a little flat spot right above the connection. The tip is not that sharp, definitely not for a twitch rod. So on paper you can definitely find better rods out there. But I got my first Eradicator 5 years ago, and all these years, folks, the Eradicator has always been my favorite, let's say, non-exotic rod. There is one exotic rod that I like perhaps just a little bit more than the Eradicator, but that rod is stupid expensive, it's unavailable, and the funny thing is, if you put that exotic rod on paper, it's not that impressive either. But the Eradicator is an absolutely unique rod, folks. I can tell you that there is nothing on the market that is that long and that thin. This rod is 6'7" and it is still thin as a toothpick. And on top of that, the action of the blank is absolutely perfect. This rod is good for twitching. it's good for pulling micro swim baits, it's good for casting, it's good for fighting the fish. I enjoy just holding it in my hand, I enjoy just looking at it. I just love everything about this rod, folks. The reason I didn't include this rod in my prior buying guides is because this rod became unavailable immediately after my review 5 years ago, and it has been unavailable all of these years. But last year somebody started selling this rod again on eBay. I bought a copy myself, it cost me $300 which included shipping, and I inspected the copy. I have 3 eradicators now and I didn't find anything wrong with the copy. So if you watch one of my many fishing videos with this rod, and I must have at least 50 fishing videos with this rod, and you wanna try it, keep in mind that it is available now, but perhaps before you buy it, watch the last 5 minutes of this video again, just to be clear on the reasons I love this rod. Folks, this is the end of the buying guide, but if you follow my YouTube channel, you probably noticed that I reviewed a lot of other nice rods, and you probably wonder why they didn't make the buying guide. There are some rods that I didn't include because I can only recommend them to a small group of people, and you really have to watch the whole review to be able to decide if that rod is a good fit for you, and that makes these recommendations more difficult. But I do have a whole playlist with rod reviews, and if you have the time, I think it's worth browsing through that playlist. But this is the end of the 2025 buying guide, and we're gonna talk more about this next year. Thank you for watching, folks.